Uncle Claude here. And if you don't know who this is, well, then you haven't been watching a lot of NBA basketball over the past 20 some odd years. He is the current head coach of the LA Clippers, Doc Rivers. Why am I showing him? Well, this guy should have coached his last game as a Clipper last night. If you saw that fiasco of a game, if you're a Clippers fan, and I'm going to be honest, I could care less about any of these NBA teams at this rate. The Clippers got manhandled, and they had a 3-1 lead in the series, but they got smoked in both Game 6 and Game 7. I mean, Game 5 wasn't terrible, but Game 6 and 7, that was pathetic. That was absolutely pathetic the way they played. They made Jokic look like a combination of Hakeem Olajuwon, Bill Walton, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, name whatever classic big man you want. I mean, they made him look tremendous. And I'm not even going to speak on Jamal Murray, who was killing them. I mean, people were questioning was he going to even play? Well, how effective he was going to play. There was no doubt he was going to play. But the Clippers were awful. And all quote unquote playoff P Paul George, my goodness. You know what, Paul George reminds me, and the sad part is I actually like him, but let's face it, in the clutch, he is dreadful and always has been. He was dreadful in Indiana. He was dreadful in Oklahoma City. And goodness, he reached an all-time low tonight. He was terrible. He reminds me of Patrick Ewing. And all you Knicks fans, you know how bad Patrick Ewing was in the clutch. Now, Paul George was a much better player all around than Patrick Ewing, but you get the picture. You just can't. He's not a winning basketball player. And if I'm the Clippers, I would trade him for an all-star big man as soon as I could, because he needs to be paired. When I say he, I'm obviously talking about Kawhi Leonard. And Kawhi Leonard was not great either. He was bad too. I'm not letting him off the hook. But those guys are under contract. We know they'll be back in Clipperland. Doc Rivers has done this before. See, Doc Rivers is the most, well, since Mike D'Antoni is not coming back, but he'll be picked up somewhere. The two most overrated coaches in the NBA are Mike D'Antoni and Doc Rivers. At least Doc Rivers has one championship under his belt, but let's be fair, he should have gotten another one with the Celtics. Now, I understand the Kendrick Perkins injury might have cost him one, but goodness gracious, you still had Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce. And you couldn't take down Kobe with Ron Artest, Pau Gasol, and Derek Fisher? Really? I mean, last I checked, it was 3 Hall of Famers to 2, and you had the 3, and you still lost it. And Kobe was dreadful in that Game 7. I mean, he was something like 8 of 24. He was dreadful. Ron Artest in, Metta World Peace at that time, and I believe he's still going by that. Metta World Peace and Derek Fisher were the guys who won that Game 7. Now, Kobe ended up being the Finals MVP because he was great in that series, but not that particular game. Now, let's move forward to when he's with the Clippers and has a chance to go to the conference finals. Listen, he had in their primes Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. How'd that work out? I mean, they folded against the Houston Rockets. And now this is his coup de grace as far as epic collapses. They got blown right out the window in that third quarter, and the game was never in doubt. They were just out and out dreadful. Listen, when the best player on the Clipper team is Montrezl Harrell in the second half, you know you have no shot of winning. And Montrezl Harrell is a very good basketball player, don't get me wrong, but he is not the guy who's supposed to take you to the promised land, and he is a very limited offensive player. Now, you can make that case, and when he won the championship in 2008, like, he's very similar to what Mike Ditka was as an NFL head coach. Because if you remember, Tom Thibodeau was getting much of the notoriety when they won that title. Now, Thibodeau has not done anything to speak of recently as an NBA head coach. Now, you could, if you want to bring up the Derrick Rose Chicago Bulls, you could, but they never even made it to a conference finals. And Thibodeau, unfortunately, he sort of wears out his welcome by like year 3 or 4 because of his defensive style. It burns teams out. And listen, that's a Knick hire. I understand why the Knicks did it, but to me, that wasn't the hire that they should have done. You know, I've been saying that Mark Jackson should have been the New York Knicks head coach for years. He should have been the coach over Mike D'Antoni, who they finally had chose way back when Donnie Walsh was the GM. And here we go again. But this one is about Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers should not be anywhere near the Staples Center when they go back to the Staples Center, hopefully next year, and everything hopefully gets somewhat back to normal. Because let's face it, it will never be truly back to normal ever in the world ever again. But you can't bring back Doc Rivers after this epic collapse. I mean, 3 strikes, you're out. Twice as Clipper head coach, especially with all the talent that they have garnered and all the money that was spent. Doc Rivers, when you look at getting the best out of his talent, he has not done that. And this goes back to the Chris Paul, Blake Griffin guys, and it really has magnified itself in the bubble with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Doc Rivers should be fired. It's plain and simple. If this was any other head coach, we would be talking about walking him to the door. Listen, Doc Rivers' bags need to be packed immediately, and that's my opinion. This is Uncle Claude signing out. Please like, share, and subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. Take care, and God bless.